As the NFL draft creeps ever closer, it is time for us to break down yet another fantasy relevant position group, ranking them 1 to 10 pre-draft, solely based on their skills, solely based on how I see them. Today, we're going to be diving into quarterbacks, a very hot button issue for those Superflex League members. So as always, like the video, subscribe down below, leave a comment, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to Twin Takes Fantasy Football. Today we'll be doing our pre-draft rankings for the quarterbacks in the 2023 NFL draft class. Obviously a much more pertinent conversation than the quarterbacks we were talking about last year. That was a terrible quarterback class, but this year, these are quarterbacks that are all projected to go pretty highly in the draft. I mean, there's at times where the first 4 picks were all quarterbacks, which is basically unheard of. And the funny part about it is you get the entire gambit of quarterbacks. You have the super toolsy ones, the guys with super high upside, super athletic quarterbacks, the ones with the high floor, but maybe not the super highest ceiling. So tons of skills, pros and cons to debate and weigh. And obviously the landing spot will determine quite a bit of how these quarterbacks shake out. But right now we're trying to evaluate these quarterbacks landing spot agnostic, solely based on the skills that they bring to the table. So we'll be evaluating them all as if they are all going to the Indianapolis Colts under head coach Shane Steichen. Absolutely no bias, but he is the guy that mentored both Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts, and they turned out to have pretty successful NFL careers and also pretty good fantasy careers. So that's where all these guys are going. So let's start out. And it's key to remember that this is fantasy rankings, not NFL rankings. So the first overall pick I'm going to have here is going to be Anthony Richardson. Yes, I know, kind of spicy, but we have to remember just the way that the NFL is developing right now. Anthony Richardson is an absolute freak athletic specimen. I mean, he broke the combine. It's not like he's testing the 95th percentile. He was 99th percentile in everything he tested in, and not a single person dating back to when these stats were recorded could beat him. He was number 1 in the history of any quarterback that tested along these stats. So he's absolutely going to revolutionize the position if he can end up putting it all together at the next level. Would I take him number 1 overall? Absolutely not. He's way too raw of a prospect to really bank on leading your team and being a surefire prospect, especially at the 101 position. However, for fantasy, he is a cheat code. We know that running quarterbacks are a cheat code. We look at guys like Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and how consistently they can finish inside the top 10 and how much it buys you time on the field. And if whatever team drafts Anthony Richardson is willing to construct an offense around him and his rushing ability, it's hard not to see him, at least rush for 60 yards and a touchdown every game. Your floor is like 12 points a game. I mean, it's such a safe floor, plus the passing on top of that. He does have a cannon of an arm, but he does have to work on accuracy. And I mean, no one's going to disagree at this point that Tom Brady's not the GOAT of the NFL, but how many times is he's the GOAT of the actual fantasy football? Yeah, he had some great passing performances, but more often than not, it was 20-point games, 22-point games, 18-point games. Guys like Anthony Richardson with their rushing ability have the ability to break open the game. This basically, to me, boils down to a Kirk Cousins versus Justin Fields question. Who would you rather have? And I feel like the majority of people who will want to win leagues, who want to shoot for that upside, are going to pick Justin Fields, and that's why I'm okay with taking Anthony Richardson as high as 102 in a Dynasty Superflex rookie draft. I know that's super spicy, but if he goes to the right landing spot, in a landing spot that I'm confident in, like the Colts, I would be willing to take that upshot on him. He's just that dynamic of an athlete. So number 2 in our rankings is going to be Bryce Young. Yeah, what a fall from grace. He goes from 1 to 2. Like I said, if this is the actual NFL rankings, I would have Bryce ranked number 1 overall, but this is fantasy, and the upside of Anthony Richardson cannot be ignored. However, Bryce, he's the most pro-ready of any NFL QB in this draft. He has been groomed is such a bad word to say for a guy that's this young, but basically he was, molded from a very young age that he was going to be a quarterback. He went to quarterbacking camps. He was told he was going to be a quarterback from a young age. And I mean, it really shows in his play. I mean, his football IQ is insane. He's maybe one of the smartest guys when it comes to evaluating the field and evaluating coverage. Watching him play at Alabama, it just seems like he never makes a bad decision, whether he's inside or outside of the pocket. He is one of those guys that can make incredible plays, throws accuracy, can hit a dime 40 yards down the field. And also when the play breaks down, he knows how to extend a play and he knows how to make very conscious and smart plays outside of the pocket. I think it's going to translate very, very well to the next level at the NFL and commanding an NFL offense. He's very smart with the football. So I think at least in that regard, he's going to be around for a long time. Again, he has a very safe floor. He has a very longevity. He's going to be playing for probably past his first contract. So if you need a guy that just comes in as a second QB, obviously Bryce Young has a very high upside. And obviously his arm, people are saying he has a bad arm. I don't think he's a bad arm. He actually has a great arm. He actually has great control and he actually can, fling the ball fairly far down the field. Obviously the biggest drawback with Bryce is his size. He is historically the smallest quarterback that's ever going to come into the NFL. Not height-wise, but certainly weight-wise. And people are wondering, how durable can he be? Can he sit in there and take hits from these bigger, stronger, faster NFL players? And I think he can, frankly. I think that, he's taken some pretty violent hits at Bama. And I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who was saying those hits would be personal fouls in the NFL. The college game is actually kind of a much rougher game than the NFL. So Bryce Young actually might be a little bit more protected when it comes to playing in the NFL pocket. Obviously, with his size, we've seen short quarterbacks come in and struggle throwing over the middle of the field where the size does impact them a little bit. Obviously, Kyler Murray being the most prominent example as he is the same height as Bryce Young. But I think Bryce Young, he stands really tall in the pocket. He knows how to, compensate for his size. And I think he makes a lot of his arm talent and football IQ do make up for his size. So and he does, frankly, it can't be understated that he comes from Alabama. He comes from a very professional culture. He comes from a very pro-style ready offense. He knows how to win. He's familiar with winning. He will bring in a level of maturity to your team at the NFL, which obviously I think coaches will love, and I think he's going to be a great asset to come. So number 3 here, let's move on, is going to be C.J. Stroud. At one point projected to be the number 1 overall pick in this NFL draft. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. It seems like all the rumors coming out of the Panthers camp is that it's going to be Bryce Young. But CJ Stroud, he's an interesting case, and a guy I really want to talk about because coming into this year, he was my QB1, but he's really fallen out of favor as he falls to the 3rd spot here. He's a guy, unlike Bryce, he does have that prototypical size that you like to see from a quarterback, but there are a lot of things that do concern me when you kind of evaluate his past season on the whole. He was abysmal under pressure, had one of the highest pressure to sacks rates, which, is indicative of a quarterback when they get under pressure. How often does that turn into a sack? He had one of the highest of those in the country. It seemed like he really kind of struggled under pressure and didn't know how, and his decision making did break down when the pocket started to collapse. People were wondering if we're going to see his athleticism and mobility, especially when it comes from scrambling out of the pocket or maybe some design runs. And that really just did not happen at all this past season, except when it came to the Georgia game. And that's really what CJ Stroud's game boils down to. Are you going to evaluate CJ Stroud holistically on the entire 2022 college football season? Or are you going to evaluate him on his excellent game he played against Georgia and the excellent pro day and combine showing that he had? Now, there are a lot of scouts that go by the mentality of if they've done it once, he can do it again. We just have to train him to do it enough. And once they see him to be able to operate at that high level like Georgia, that's why so many people fell in love with him. That's when he started, flying up draft boards yet again. But I'm a guy that does not bet on outliers. I've said this a million times. I'm not betting on that one game that happens. This would be saying that Nick Foles should be a number 1 overall pick because he saw him light up the Minnesota Vikings and the Patriots in that Super Bowl run. I just don't know if you can do it one time. I don't know how consistent that is. He's still going to have issues, especially when translating to the bigger, faster, stronger players of the NFL. So I guess that really kind of boils down. Are you on the optimistic side of CJ Stroud? Do you like what you see? Do you think he can, be more consistent with that, bring those abilities to the next level? Obviously, he does he's very charming, especially at the interviews. He talked about it. He addressed his athleticism concerns. He addressed a lot of those issues. I mean, he definitely, had a silver tongue when a lot of people were trying to be very critical of his game, which obviously is going to go very far with the NFL team having confidence in him. It's just, I don't take bets on outliers. And I think that you're going to get more of regular season CJ Stroud rather than playoff CJ Stroud, even though it was against Georgia. So he has that upside. He has prototypical size. There is, the ability for him to be great, but I really kind of project him out to be sort of a Jared Goff-esque quarterback, a guy that's going to be really propped up by the wide receivers and weapons around him a la at OSU. So moving on to quarterback number 4 is, don't want those. Yep, we're going to go Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker is actually my quarterback number 4. He comes in over Will Levis. And there's quite a few reasons for that. And I know this is spicy, but just hear me out. This is, again, for fantasy, not for the NFL. He is very athletic. He does have that athleticism and can extend plays, unlike CJ Stroud did. He works very well outside of the pocket. And 2, he had college production. Same way we talked about wide receivers, most indicative metric of NFL fantasy production is college fantasy production, and Hendon Hooker was very, very productive at Tennessee when he was playing under center. He was in contention for the Heisman prior to his ACL tear, and I think, once people kind of got over the injury concerns, the ACL tear is not a death sentence like it used to be. We saw Jameson Williams come back about 7 months or so since he tore his ACL and play on the NFL field. So I think now that people are seeing the progress that he's made and the injury and reevaluating his tape before the injury, he's obviously risen up draft boards, potentially being a first round pick. Some people have a number 5 overall. It's a little spicy. I'm not going that far. But obviously another huge critic on him is, again, the Tennessee offense. We've talked about this ad nauseum with both Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. But again, if it was an offense that, could be, if everyone could scheme that offense, if it was entirely based on scheme, didn't really matter about the players, why isn't everyone doing it? It does take a certain caliber of player to navigate an NFL offense. He does have a very high football IQ. He was making very good throws. He does, he's a little bit slow on his timing, but his accuracy, but the accuracy with which he throws is pretty good. If he can work on that timing, I think he'll be a pretty, borderline starting quarterback in the NFL. But I like his maturity. I like what he brings from, his multiple seasons starting at Tennessee. I do like his arm talent. He does have a big arm, and the athleticism of being able to create plays outside of the pocket is what has Hendon Hooker at number 4 for me. Number 5, you can guess it's going to be Will Levis here. He's not going to drop too far, but there's really 2 big things going for Will Levis. That's 1, his absolute howitzer of an arm. That thing, he can launch that ball. And 2, Josh Allen's success. Frankly, he's been comped to Josh Allen so many times it makes me sick because, say it with me now, Josh Allen was an outlier. We don't comp players to outliers. It's the same thing that I got so up in a tizzy about over Kalijah Kancey when people are like, oh, well, undersized pass rusher out of Pitt, Aaron Donald-esque, I see. And I'm like, come on. You can't comp him to one of the few guys that have made it when you have so many examples of these guys failing and being out of the league within 2 to 3 years. But certainly Josh Allen has given, the toolsy quarterbacks a chance to make themselves a name. It's why Zach Wilson went so high up in the draft last year. But even Josh Allen had to take some time to develop. He was considered a bust after his first year. His second year wasn't great. It wasn't until his third year until he started actually proving he was a starting quarterback. And also took the right coach in the right situation to develop him. And that was Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. If Will Levis goes to a terrible situation with a coordinator that I don't believe in has the talent to develop a quarterback, then I will be fully out on Will Levis. It's really about who can develop his talent. But as of, we're talking about the Indianapolis Colts. Here we are. I think they can develop his talent and make him a little bit more accurate. But, listen, that's so much harder to develop from a guy that's coming into the NFL the way Will Levis currently stacks up. He has so many red flags that concern me, and the bust chance is just way, way, way too high. I mean, he's wildly inaccurate. He had no production in college. I mean, yes, 2 years ago he was productive, but this past year it was pretty abysmal production. He had, for a guy that has a big time arm like him, he had no big time throws. And again, I don't think this is going to be a guy that you can plug and play on an offense. He has to take time to develop. It's going to be quite the long shot to relevance. So in rookie drafts, I'm going to pass over him in the first round. I'll let someone else pick him up, maybe trade for him a year down the line if you think you saw some shots of brilliance, you think he has the opportunity. But I think he's more of a landmine in the middle of the first round than anything else. Moving on to number 6. Last guy we're going to talk about super in depth here, but a sleeper and a guy that I mean, he's been a sleeper in quarterbacks discussions in both NFL and fantasy, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson, God, I love what he brings to the game down there at UCLA. I know I'm not alone in this. A lot of people love the athleticism that he has. He has a huge arm as well. But another thing is he was a 5-year starter at UCLA, and he had good production throughout his entire time there. I don't think that's a knock. I think that just brings a level of maturity that a lot of NFL teams will look for, and I think he provides a very high-level backup at the NFL level. Think a Tyler Huntley, so to speak, and if he can, bring up his accuracy a little bit and work on his accuracy, genuinely could be, a guy that can come in, maybe has a late career resurgence, maybe Geno Smith-esque, maybe has like a career like Andy Dalton where he comes in, backs up, takes over for the last half of a season. There's a path to relevance. It's not going to be immediate. It's not a guy that, I'm picking up in the drafts. I'll wait to see where he goes. Landing spot's obviously really, really important with DTR, but you can get him in the 4th round in most rookie drafts. You can probably pick him up as a UDFA. But he's so toolsy, has so many traits. And if he lands in a place that's willing to develop those traits as a backup, then I'd certainly be willing to throw him on my taxi for a year or two. Again, very, 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 despite the 5 years of starting, he at least has the football acumen to be relevant in football, but he still is very, very raw, just freaky athletic, cannon of an arm, but needs to get better about timing, needs to get better with his accuracy, and then he could potentially be seeing the NFL field. But like the last guy that maybe I'm taking at the end of the 4th round, that's like the last guy I'm taking a shot on. The rest of these guys, they're not relevant to fantasy. I'm just rounding out for the sake of having 10 quarterbacks, but I'll go through them quickly. At number 7, we're going to go down. We're going to have Jalen Hall out of BYU. Just massive just athleticism off the charts. With these guys, we're coming in. The hope here with like a Jalen Hall or even an Aiden O'Connell who appear later on this list is you're looking for a Taysom Hill, a guy that comes in, maybe is a little bit of a gadget player, maybe gets a tight end designation, maybe becomes a high-end backup at some point. But I do like his athleticism. I love his ability as a runner. Maybe he can transition a little bit, playing a different position on the field just because of how freaky athletic he is. Number 8, Tanner McKee, obviously going to I don't think he ranks this high. I don't think he's the 37th ranked prospect. I don't think he even goes day 2. He'll probably be a day 3 pick. However, he just has like a massive arm, a massive frame. He goes to Stanford. He's very, very, again, very high football acumen, places the ball well. Does have to work on, mobility in the pocket, making reads, but I think he has, the prototypical size of a quarterback that teams will fall in love with. Maybe take a late round shot on him. Number 9, Aiden O'Connell, mentioned him just like in the same breath as Jalen Hall. A guy, just freaky athletic, could come in, maybe change positions, maybe be a high-end backup that you would have as a handcuff if you have a kind of a volatile quarterback like a Lamar Jackson, like a Justin Field, these guys that tend to get injured. And last but not least, we'll go with Clayton Tune out of Houston. He has prototypical size. He's very athletic. He just is a guy that seems to, like, when the pressure starts leaning down on Clayton Tune, he performs better. He, I hate to say it, has that dog in him. He could come in and be, a very good backup. I'm looking at more of the Cooper Rush type of ability for Clayton Tune. To come in, be a backup in case a guy gets hurt. Obviously has the ability to pick up fantasy yards on the ground. But again, these guys, number 7 through number 10, Hall, McKee, O'Connell, Tune, I wouldn't worry about it. Just leave them. Stick with the high-end quarterbacks and the guys that are going to be starting. Notable omissions, just want to wrap this up. I omitted Stetson Bennett and Max Duggan. Stetson Bennett, I hate the guy. Genuinely don't like him. He has massive character concerns in my opinion. This is also not something that's recently. Obviously, he skipped the Senior Bowl in order to go party and get arrested in Dallas, Texas. And that's apparently not behavior that's new or one-off. I know people who were with him at the University of Georgia, even back to his freshman year, where you go knocking on doors, breaking people's doors down, throwing up all over the patio. There are videos of this circulating around. So I have serious character concerns about Stetson Bennett when he's on my do not draft list. Max Duggan, people like him. He led TCU, but he is just wildly inaccurate. Wildly inaccurate. It's funny, I brought up being a Taysom Hill type person for 2 quarterbacks already in O'Connell and Hall. Frankly, Max Duggan, that might be his path to any NFL relevancy. He's just does not have the accuracy to even be remotely relevant on the NFL field. If you're a TCU fan and you love his rushing ability and think that maybe he can develop, stash him as a UDFA, but other than that, I don't see his relevance in the NFL quite a bit. So that's going to wrap it up for quarterbacks. I know it kind of got a bit off the rails there at the end. It's really hard to talk about, fantasy relevant quarterbacks after that top 5 position, but round it out for 10, just giving you some clarity. Give me your rankings down below. Would love to see what you guys think. Remember, these are rankings for fantasy, not for NFL. Obviously, this is very, very different if we're approaching this as an NFL style caliber draft, but this is particularly for fantasy value. So we'll come back, do running backs tomorrow. That's going to be an exciting show. Have so many breakdowns, see who misses the cut, but I'll see you then.